we are going to move on to our next presentation of the afternoon. And Kendal, can you say hello?
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see everyone virtually on the call, and I appreciate you guys having me.
Well, thank you for being with us today. Before you pull up your slides, can you give us a self-introduction?
Sure. So I'm Kendal Berg. I'm the Director of IT Planning and Execution for Sara Financial Group, which is the largest private brokerage firm in the United States. I've been in financial services for about a decade, working at some other well-known banks such as Capital One, JP Morgan Chase, and really specialize in kind of providing executive support. So I support the CTO really with whatever they think of. And it's a really interesting perspective of kind of a combination of how things come together at the executive level to make the company stronger, but also what do leaders really care about when it comes to progressing and growing their teams, and what are they looking for, which has kind of bled into the topic that I'm going to share with everybody today, which is all about how to build your personal brand and advocate for yourself when it comes to your own career and your own career progression. So let me get this in presentation mode.
Let me stop sharing on my side. Let me stop sharing on my side just to make sure. Let's see. Hold on. It could be me. I'm going to make sure I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see. Because it's interesting. It's popping up something on my side. Let me try this. Well, and if not, I can make you the co-host. Let me play with something one more time. It is not. It is something on my side.
No worries.
Right. Let's see. Huh. All right. Now try to share it again for me.
Yes, ma'am.
Now it shows up. It's always the one little button that I don't have clicked correctly. All right, well, we can see your slides. Take it away. The floor is all yours.
No worries. Awesome. So I think this is something that is often overlooked when it comes to your career, your leadership, your success, is really kind of understanding the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of what builds that success higher. So when you think of success and what is driving it forward, it's not always the people that we think deserve it the most, right? All of us have our own unique perspectives of who around us is doing the most work, who's leaning in the most, the value that we ourselves bring to an organization. But what drives success forward ultimately is the impact of the work that's done by the individuals, the relationships that those individuals have with the people responsible for deciding who progresses in their career, and then ultimately how that work is showcased and shared across the organization. There are so many times in probably all of our experience where we've seen individuals who do great work. They do great things, but it never quite gets the attention that it deserves. And there's a little bit of strategy involved in how you position yourself well to drive forward your own success. So I've heard this phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I've also heard the squeaky wheel gets the cheese. I'm not entirely sure which one is correct, but ultimately what it comes down to is that communication is key. Right? If you are not communicating the value that you bring to an organization, then ultimately, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many hours you put in, your success will be stifled by that limitation. And so I'm a rather tactical person. I like to think about the individual action items that you can take that will ultimately drive your success forward. So as we talk about building your brand, as we talk about self-advocating, we will specifically talk about how you do that starting this afternoon when you go back to work, or starting tomorrow when you log on. What are some of those actions you take? And these are kind of the 5 categories that we'll talk through in our time today. So the first is networking and building your influencer list. So we would all like to believe that our careers are a meritocracy, that if you do good work, you are rewarded for that work in kind. But the reality is that the decision of who gets promoted ultimately comes down to a few key individuals, generally, in most working experiences. And while that may not necessarily be the way we all want it to work, coming to terms with how you can best build relationships with those influential people and understand what they're looking for so that you can effectively meet their expectations is key. And so how do you network? How do you build your influencer list? This is something that we'll kind of talk through as we go through this today. Second thing is building your brand, which is defining who you are and who you want to be. And then how do you take that brand and perpetuate it through the organization, right? Nike is a great example of this. If I say Nike, you probably think either Air Jordans or Just Do It. But that didn't happen on accident. It's not like Nike in a back room said, oh, we're going to be the Just Do It company, but we won't tell anybody and we'll see if they think the same thing. They put it on everything. It's on the letterhead. It's on the brand. It's on the marketing. You see it a million times and you begin to associate that with that brand. And the same is true of yourself and how you show up to work and how you progress your own career and how you take that ownership. The third thing that we'll talk about is trading non-promotable tasks for big impact projects. And there's some nuance to this. Non-promotable tasks is one of my favorite things to talk about with my team. There will always be non-promotable work that you do, but it should not be all of the work that you do. And how do you differentiate between the two and use that to help yourself? And then skill building and diversification, continuing to learn. I think Juan talked about it in the first section. And I also work with a doctoral student who's studying this right now, that the more senior you get in your career, the higher you get closer to that executive level, the less you think you have to learn. And the reality is the opposite is true. We are all getting dumber. We are all getting further away from the time where we studied these things, where we were open learners, where we were receptive to different ways to tackling problems and finding solutions. And so to her point, staying humble and leaning in and continuing to build your skills really is what's going to help you get to the level that you want to. And then the last piece is all about asking the right questions, speaking up and being involved. So we'll kind of go through each of these 5 things today, and then I will give homework because I'm that type of person, and happy to answer any questions at the end. So the first thing that we're going to tackle is who has power over your career. And something that I often share with people is that you have a responsibility to your career. You have a responsibility to your own success. You have to take that action and that ownership, but you do not have exclusive power over what happens in your career. Oftentimes, we are at the whims of a bad leader, as we've already discussed today, or we're at the whims of a company structure or company culture that has limitations on career progression. So what's really key is to understand not only what responsibility you have to continue to progress yourself, but also who else is in the game that we need to be paying attention to. So one way to do this is to create an influencer list. So we're going to talk through one of my favorite ways to do this. And this is from a book called Stealing the Corner Office. And the preface that I will say about this book, if you go read it, is he is very clearly trying to pick a fight with somebody. I don't know who, the reader, somebody he worked with once. So his language is very, he is picking a fight. So take that with a grain of salt, but he does go through this exercise. And I think that it's a really key one. And it's something that I've always done subconsciously, but now very much focus with myself and my teams to continue doing. So the first is to list out the people that you're interacting with most often, or the people you know have power in your career, right? So for example, you could have somebody 2 levels higher than you that you very rarely interact with, but they may hold a lot of power. You're going to list out these individuals, their titles, their relationship to you. And then the remaining of these are going to be scores 1 through 5. So if they are more senior than you, they get a 5, less senior than you, they get a 1, same level, they get a 3. Risk. Do they pose a risk to your career? Are they very negatively outspoken? Do they have the power to fire you? That could get them a high risk factor. Do they have direct power over you? So your manager and your skip manager will almost always score highest in this category. Do they have responsibility for your exposure? If you work with a partner group and there's someone on that team who could keep you from getting the exposure you need or advocate for you to get exposure you're not getting, high score in this category. Do they instill fear across the organization? We've all worked with somebody like that, right? That just the idea you're going to be on a project with them, a little bit of heart palpitations. Do they provide validation for your work, for your career, your progression? And how much power do you think they'll hold in the future? I've worked with individuals in the past who I'm like, wow, they are so unbelievably capable. They're thought of so well across the organization. They're probably going to move up really high in the future. That would give them a high future score. Then you total all of those up and you stack rank them highest to lowest. Now, this does seem like a very mathematical way to approach this. And I'm a math major, economics major. I live in the numbers. And so this can feel a little bit dehumanizing and a little bit inauthentic, but it's not intended to be. It's really an exercise for you to understand who out there is going to have power over whether or not you're progressing in the way that you want to be. Then you're going to reach out to at least your top 5 and build relationships with them. So odds are some of these people you'll already have relationships with. They'll be your manager, they'll be your skip leader, they'll be an executive in your space. But somebody may show up who's a peer of yours who you don't spend very much time with. But when you go through this exercise, you realize like, oh, wow, they really do hold a lot of sway. Build those initial relationships, get to know them. And this is an evaluation of how much of a relationship with these individuals you want to have. This is not a sleazy car salesman tactic of I'm going to pick the number one and become their best friend. But it is important for each of us to understand who around us is going to have power over that career progression and that development. And then as you meet with them, you're going to determine how often and when to cultivate that relationship. Right? So if that's somebody in your org who you seem to get along with well, they have a lot of power. Maybe you're meeting with them on a quarterly basis just to stay in sync. Maybe you want to learn more about them and their division, how they progressed. It's very important to focus on how you want to cultivate these relationships. So it's not just a meet, it's not just a list, but it's an ongoing relationship. And I apologize. It is thundering and hailing here. So if it gets bad, let me know. And I will put on headphones. And then the second piece becomes, who are you? So you've identified the people who have control over your career. They have influence over how you progress. The second piece you have exclusive ownership of, which is who are you? And I often say that your brand should walk into a room before you do and leave long after you leave, right? So your brand, how you are represented across your organization and to the people that you work with, that precedes you, right? It's the same as the rumor mill, right? We've all heard at least one work rumor that spread like wildfire, whether it was true or not true. And the same is true of this brand that you build for yourself and that you cultivate for yourself. So as you continue to progress, you need to outline who you want to be. You need to outline what you want your brand to say about you. Branding does not happen on accident. All right. I wish it did. It'd make all of our lives easier, but it doesn't. Your brand should align with the strengths that you have that differentiate you from your competition. I think Juan touched on that earlier. To progress your career, you got to be a little bit competitive. All right. What differentiates you? What makes you strong? And then you need to sell that about yourself, sell that ability and that capability to your leaders, to your teams, to your project groups. And then the third thing is you need to identify projects that will set you up for success to either reinforce that brand, build that brand, or highlight why that brand is a good fit for the company. And I'll give you a perfect example. So I work for a CTO. I run planning and execution, which basically means whatever that they need. And my brand is that I am organized and highly results driven, right? And that brand did not come about on accident. If you ask me what I do for the company, I help organize a lot of the chaos and I make sure that we achieve our results and our goals. That's how I talk about myself. And every project that I'm brought into is a direct result of somebody going, wow, this project's kind of unorganized. We should bring in Kendal. Because that is the reputation and the brand that I built for myself that I cultivated very intentionally. And that brand should be kind of a combination of your image, your mission. What do you bring? Part of my mission is that I'm incredibly passionate about mentorship and coaching. I've mentored hundreds of individuals. I've coached even more. I've led multiple people to 2- and 3-time promotions in very short time spans. That's part of my mission, is to grow the next generation of leaders. It's part of why I'm here today. But your mission becomes part of your brand. Then your values become part of your brand. What is important to you? What value do you bring to the organization? But what value do you expect from the organization? And then what is your vision for yourself and your own growth? Right? Do you want to be CEO one day? Have a plan, know where you're headed, and use that to create your brand, and then use that language to talk about yourself, as well as to highlight the skills that you already bring to the table. The next piece is driving impact across your organization. And we're going to talk about what a non-promotable task is and how it hurts you. So I think there's a common misconception that all of your work is business critical. And for some people it is. If you work in audit risk, pretty mission critical, right? But if I hire somebody to run a report every week and they do it, comes out perfectly on time, comes out perfectly correct every week on the same day, and they don't do anything else, should I promote them? The general answer is no. They are doing their task very well. They deserve to be compensated fairly for it. But doing that task well does not open them up to the next level of seniority. It does not progress their career in the direction that they want to go. And so it's important to be able to identify and seize large scale, large impact projects across your organization. Right? What are the things that are going to change the way that your company operates? And using the same example of the person who ran the report, what if they ran that report every week, but then they automated it? And when they automated it, they communicated it to all of the business partner groups that consume that report so that it was on demand and in real time. And then they scaled that report to hit more business units. Suddenly, this is a very promotable work. It's about seizing that opportunity to create and drive impact. So that's going to be partially understanding your own strengths, right? If you do not understand automation, reporting structure, and data, that would be a bad job for you to take. It's not going to help you get where you want to get. But if you do love data and you have experience with tools like Power BI or Tableau, and you want to lean into that, that could be a great opportunity for you to apply your strengths in an existing area. And then you look for those opportunities to drive that value across your organization, like automation, like real-time data. And then you're going to work for opportunities to collaborate across multiple groups. The more parts of your business that you touch, the more people who know your brand, who support your reputation, and who can help you progress your career. It also grows your influencer list. So now we've come full circle. So as you build your brand, as you start applying it on high impact projects, as you're building relationships with your influencer, how do you not go stale? How do you not become irrelevant? My favorite example of this is print marketing, right? So if in the 80s, you were a print marketing specialist, you were in incredibly high demand, newspapers, magazines, even television written content, such high demand. But if you did not pivot between 1980 and now to digital marketing, you are much less competitive in your field. And so the saying is, if you're not learning, you're failing slowly and maybe not noticeably, but you're definitely slowing down your own trajectory and your own growth. So if you look at the 2023 most in-demand skills list, according to LinkedIn, you will probably not be surprised to see that the top 4 to 5 are all soft skills. Management, communication, customer service, leadership, even sales to an extent. Those are not hard skills that are learned and studied. Those are soft skills. But that doesn't mean you can't be improving your skill in this space. It doesn't mean you can't be attending trainings like this, or calling into monthly meetings, or reading books on self-development. That's the way you build those skills. And they are more in demand than technical skills, especially the higher you get in your career. In addition to that, being able to project manage, research, and analyze data, increasingly important. And that's for all roles, not just tech specific or data specific. Where I see people struggle with skill building, diversification, leadership, management is going to touch on the same thing that Juan touched on earlier, which is imposter syndrome. So if you look at the Webster dictionary definition, it says the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skills. Right? This goes back to what she said. The best and brightest of us think that we either don't deserve where we are, or we can't do what we're supposed to be doing. Now, the way that I reframe this when I'm working with clients I'm coaching or when I'm working with people who work for me is it is not about a lack of confidence. It is about a lack of trust in yourself. Do you trust yourself to improve your leadership skills? Do you trust yourself to communicate effectively? Do you trust yourself to learn things you've never had to do before? If you can trust your own ability to learn new things, you will overcome your imposter syndrome. But it requires not only that faith in self, but that faith in your learning ability. And the best way to maintain that trust, that faith, is to do it often. If you are always learning, suddenly there's a lot less risk of imposter syndrome because you're doing it all the time. The next bit is to ask the right questions. And this really comes down to understanding what executives and what leaders care about. For you to build your brand, your reputation, for you to get high impact projects, you need to be speaking up on calls and asking the right questions. And there's a lot of ways to ask questions that doesn't derail a meeting, right? Hey, I really appreciate where we're going with this. I was curious, as I think about this one subset of the business, have we thought about how it would apply to them? Because I know there's a lot of nuance in that space. Ask those questions, push for those truths, but make sure that you're doing it in a way which is ultimately going to deliver on what executives care about. It's not just about what you need to know. It's about what leadership needs to know and how you can facilitate that information. So this is a very high level example, but finance, as the executive, they care about costs and savings. Technology, they care about client experience, at least we hope so. Marketing and sales, they care about revenue, right? Generally, these are the things you care about. So as you interact with these leaders, making sure that the information you're offering up freely is going to address their value statements, and or that the questions you're asking are going to give them more information about their value statements, sets you up for success as you interact with those higher levels of seniority. So it's a lot of information as you start to build your brand and advocate for yourself. You have to be intentional, right? And this is where it gets a little bit messy, because I think a lot of people confuse intentionality with inauthenticity. You don't want to become a fake version of yourself that only cares about what other people need and what other people think. But you can take responsibility for your career and ensure that the things you're doing align with how you want to think of yourself, how you want other people to think of you, to build those strong relationships that are going to help you progress in a way that allows you to stay authentic to who you are, right? Your brand should not be the antithesis of how you show up to work. It would be very hard to maintain. But then you need to advocate for yourself. You need to lean in and communicate this to people in order to continue to grow. So the next question is, where do you go from here, right? You're responsible for your own success and growth. This conversation has really jazzed you up. You're ready to lean in. You're ready to start building your brand, advocating for yourself, sharing this across your organization. How do you do that? So the first thing is that you are going to build out your influencer list, and you're going to set meetings with your top 5 in the next month. Don't wait. Most studies show that 80% of leadership trainings like this are actually ineffectual because people don't know what to do after. So they go back to their jobs. They keep doing what they've always been doing. They think that was really nice to learn all that. You have homework. Do your homework. The second thing is going to be to build your 11 list. So I built an 11 list 8 years ago. It is still in my drawer. I still look at it every quarter. And what it is 5 statements of who you want to be at work, how you want to show up. How do you want to be known? What is your brand? And 5 statements of who you don't want to be. I don't want to be a micromanager. I don't want to be seen as somebody who doesn't follow through on their deliverables. And then you're going to combine those 10 things to create one branded mission statement. I want to bring value to my organization by being organized and results oriented while building the next generation of leaders to support my organization. There's your mission statement. And you should look back at this 11 list every quarter and say, am I doing that? Am I showing up as my best self? And then the third thing is identify one project that you could propose that would be high impact. Maybe it's for your team, maybe it's for another team. And or one project you could get involved in that's pre-existing that would allow you to demonstrate your new brand and your strengths in a way that helps you progress in order to get to your goals. And then the last thing is pick 2 skills that you want or need to learn this year. I want to lean in more on my leadership skills. I want to lean in more on analytics and data. I want to understand what tools are coming through that are most popular for my division. Where do you want to lean in so that you can add value to your organization and your team? So that is it for me. I will send the homework out. I think Shelley has them. I'll make sure, Ginger, that I get them to you too. But hopefully this is very helpful about your brand building and how you advocate for yourself. But I think we're going to be open for questions now as well.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for that presentation. So yes, we've had a few questions come in. I'll go with one that came in earlier in your presentation let's see. I'll go with this one from Alexis. And Alexis says, I love my job, but it doesn't help the company with revenue. Can you repeat what you said about getting a promotion?
Yeah. So your job does not have to be directly tied to revenue outcomes or to financial cost savings, but every single person in a company, your job adds some type of value or some type of impact, right? So if you work in a call center and you answer calls all day, you are improving customer experience. You are decreasing repeat call volume. You are adding value to the organization by improving processes. You do all these things in that job. Now, if you work in marketing, maybe you are driving revenue, or in sales. Maybe you work in finance or in data and you're building a better client experience. You're helping your business grow more market share. There are always ways to articulate the impact of the work you're doing. And that becomes so key when talking about not only your own accomplishments, but the value that you bring to the company when you're in those conversations to advocate for a promotion or to advocate for a raise. And the example of this that I always see specifically in project management is a lot of project managers will say, yeah, I filled out the forms and I tracked all the deadlines. No, you didn't. You oversaw a complex project, bringing together multiple stakeholder groups to ensure that you were able to deliver your project by the deadline while saving the company X dollars. That's what you did. But you have to be able to articulate that by focusing not only on the work that you do, but also on what work would not have happened if you were not there to do your job. And then use those types of phrases to advocate for yourself and to share that information more broadly with your organization.
Well, thank you. Well, I think we have time for one more question before we move on to our panel for the afternoon. And I'm going to go with this question from Kara. And Kara says, how can I convince an influencer to take a meeting with me?
This is something that I think is really what holds people back from meeting individuals. And we talked a lot about remote work earlier, so I'll touch on kind of the difference between remote work and in person. I will say early on in my career, I was kind of known for just showing up in people's offices. So I'm fresh out of college. I'm very junior. I worked for a CFO at the time, and I would just show up and sit in somebody's office until they showed up and say, hey, I'm Kendal. I just wanted to meet you. I've heard great things, and force it upon them. But in your remote situation, that's not quite as easy. So there are kind of 2 different ways to approach this depending on the bureaucratic structure of your company. So if you have a very open structure, very open door policy, I would just reach out directly to the individual and say, hey, I'm relatively new in my role. I've heard wonderful things about you at the company. I feel that you're really great at X skill or X job that I'd like to learn more about. I'd love to get 15 minutes on your calendar in the next 30 days. Can you let me know of a time that works so that we can touch base? And then host that meeting. Ask them questions about themselves, their job, their career trajectory. Get information from them that you wouldn't otherwise have that is beneficial to you. And so convincing them to have that meeting is more, hey, I think you're great, right? A little bit of buttering up. And use that to help get yourself in the door. The other way, if you work in an organization that's more bureaucratic, the example that I'll use, like JP Morgan Chase tends to be a much more structured organization, is I would use your boss. hi, I've heard that so-and-so is really great at research and analytics. I want to learn more about that. Would you mind making a connection for me with this person so that we could have some time together to discuss, kind of their career trajectory and their specialization? I get more information from them. Your boss is there to support you. And if they are a great leader, which we all hope they are, they will be more than happy to facilitate that. So use their clout and their leverage to help you get in the door with some of these individuals so that you can start building those relationships more effectively.
Thank you for that. Well, Kendal, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. It was wonderful. Thank you for being with us and for all your time today.
I'm so happy to be here, and I'm excited to hear the last panel talk through some more, I'm sure, incredibly impactful topics for us.
Yes, thank you.